Welcome, everyone. We're glad to have you here. We'll let everyone roll in and then we'll get started. Let me make sure everything is good on my end. Great. Well, welcome again. We're glad you're here. If this is your first VMUG event, um, this is our mission statement. The VMware User Group, or VMUG, is an independent global customer-led organization created to maximize members' use of VMware and partner solutions through knowledge sharing, training, collaboration, and events. If you'll drop in the chat where you're joining from today, we always love to see that. Um, a couple FAQs and some housekeeping. You can get connected to a local VMUG community near you at my.vmug.com. This is also where you can find all upcoming webcasts and other information on how to get involved. If you'll please use the Q&A function throughout the session today, our panelists will be able to answer those, and we also might have some folks in the community that can help answer those as well. And then this is being recorded, and you will get a wrap-up email following the webcast that has the link to the recording. And we'll make sure that if any links are shared in the chat here today, that we add those to the YouTube description so you're able to access those after the webinar. I have to do a plug for Connect. VMUG is coming to cities in person, and we are so excited for these. Actually, every single one of the panelists today will be speaking at a variety of Connects coming up. Amsterdam is next week. You can still get tickets. Minneapolis is next month, and then we have Toronto, Dallas, and Orlando following. We would love for you to join us and come to a city near you. This will be really incredible content, a mixture of technical content, good community content, professional development, hands-on labs, certifications for those in Advantage, and discounted certifications for VMUG members. I could go on, but I will stop there. Use the QR code, or you can go to vmug.connect.com. Oh, and that was it. I will kick it over to Justin to start introducing himself. He is our VMUG board vice president and a San Antonio leader, and then I'll let the rest of the squad kick it off as well.
You just told everybody who I was. Yeah,
You got to tell us the rest.
I am the Chief Information Officer of a company called Belay Technologies. We do some contract software development. We're based in Maryland, but I'm in San Antonio myself. So I've been here about 4 years now, and I cannot beat the weather. So I enjoy it down here. But today we're going to talk to you about certifications. I just want to reemphasize that at our Connect events for Advantage members, you can sit for the cert for free. So take in the information you have, get any questions you have out there today. You can post them in the chat. If you want to come off mute, we can take you off mute. But I'll kick it over to Dave.
Thank you. My name is Dave Bradley. I am a senior cloud engineer at a company called Vizient. I'm up in the Chicago suburbs area. I'm also the Chicago VMUG leader. And yeah, Everett, your turn.
Hey, Evert Amstams from Belgium. I forgot what my official title was. Data Center Network Foundation, Network Engineer, something along those lines. But infrastructure engineer, self-employed, working for a large European financial organization.
All right, and just to recap, the two of you have both passed the VCP administrator exam.
Yes.
Yes, that is correct.
5, 2, and the 9.
5, 2, and the 9. All right, so question for you. What did you expect on the test? And then when you actually showed up to take the test, did the test meet your expectations, or was it a little bit different?
Between the 5, 2, and the 9, I'd say it was roughly very similar. Biggest thing is like name changes because, VMware likes to rebrand their products every couple months. So keep up with the acronyms and the name changes. I would say, yeah, it met expectations based on like the blueprints that are out there that they publish for it. One of the nicer things I've come to realize with the VCF test is it's a lot broader set of subject matter you have to know, so it doesn't go quite as deep like the old admin test used to be. Like on the 7 and the 8s, those were, I feel like you got to get more into the weeds on a lot of stuff, and it was more focused.
Do you feel like that's an advantage or disadvantage?
I think it kind of depends on your experience. For someone who's never touched vSAN in a production or lab environment, other than like the hands-on labs, that part was kind of a kicker, but I knew since I didn't have a lot of hands-on experience with vSAN to study up a little more on that part of the test. Um, Probably didn't study much about vCenter stuff just because that's what the main focus of the previous tests have all been on. So I feel like depending on your experience level, it could be an easier test to pass. Or if you've never touched anything, then it might be a little more difficult just because you do have to learn a broader range of things because there's so much more included on that admin test versus the old tests.
Okay, so just some quick notes because we started talking about administrator. We're going to focus primarily on administrator today. If we have questions about the engineer exam or architect exam, we can address those later on. But primarily, the most of the time is going to be on. Oh man, we're going to share my. I was like, we're going to share some links
Sorry,
today.
I didn't mean to hit enter shift six, but yeah, there's a list of
Uh,
stuff.
I was like, oh, he brought up a great point, the blueprint. Oh, yep, there it
Oh,
goes.
there's
All
all
right,
the
so
links. Sorry,
we
yep.
have some helpful links in here. We'll talk about each one of these as we kind of go through. One thing that you brought up is that you said you knew that you needed to study some of the vSAN material. So my question is, where did you go to study some of that vSAN material?
I went into the hands-on labs actually and found one that was about vSAN and kind of just went in there and started playing around until I really broke it. Then I ended the lab and started another lab and started playing around again to just kind of get some hands-on time and just to play with it. I think that's the best part about some of the hands-on labs is you can get in there. It's a real environment, do whatever you want, and if you break it and you can't fix it, just end the lab and start over. So,
Yeah, I think that's
yep,
a great point. So I want to touch on one thing real quick. Yeah, the VMware Code YouTube
yes,
was a series of 6 videos that VMware Code put together. They were hosted by Frankie, and then it was James, Stefan, and Gareth that kind of delivered material. And basically, they did a really good overview of VCF 5.2, maybe 5.1
I think it's
running through
fine.
all of the different products, tying it to the exam blueprint, and basically giving you an overview or a walkthrough of a lot of the wizards, talking through different things that were going to be required. Um, so I highly recommend that you take 6 hours of your time, maybe a little bit less than 6 hours, and at least listen to them if you can't watch them while you're driving in the car, throw them on your phone. There's a lot of really good content in there. You'll get a lot of the buzzwords. They give a really good understanding of what that product set is. One link I'm going to throw in there that we didn't include in the first pass is the bill of materials. So
Mm.
uh, one thing we don't talk about a lot are all the different names. So this bill of materials for VCF 9.0 will give you all of those new product names. It doesn't necessarily tie them back. We'll go through this in a little bit. I just wanted to get some of the material out there for you, and we can post them several times during the webinar so that you don't have to scroll all the way back up to the chat. Um, so let's talk quickly before we jump over to Everett. I haven't forgotten about you. Um, Types of questions that we experienced during the test. So the old school tests, there were, multiple choice simulations. What other things showed up on those older tests? Was it
I feel
really
like
just
that was, I
really just the
mean,
two, right?
yeah, I think so.
So now in the new VCP exam for VCF, you're going to have multiple choice, multiple select, order of operations. So you might need to reorder things in a list, but most importantly, no simulation. So you don't actually have to navigate through a UI and click the right buttons in order. Not to say that there won't be sequencing questions about what you should be doing, but you don't actually have to actively do it. Additionally, it went from 70 questions down to 60 questions. So a little bit more time back in your day or a little bit more time available to you to take the test. Um, I think the questions, at least in my experience, I think are worded better with the newer tests than they were in the old tests. So I think they really took some time to focus on what they're trying to make sure you know about the product set and not just quiz you on some really in-depth knowledge about a configuration minimum or maximum, things like that.
Yeah, I feel like they kind of took out like the config maximum questions totally at this point. I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like that's always been a why memorize that when you can easily Google that kind of stuff. So at least I
Yeah, yeah.
remember them
One
on
could
my
say that
test.
about everything, though, right? You
Yeah,
just use AI.
Yeah,
true.
I felt in general the questions focused much more on useful knowledge to have, stuff where you actually have to know the platform and you know how to deal with certain situations, and not some really obscure stuff. Where just like Dave said, where if I need to know this at any time, I can just Google this.
All right.
Yeah.
So, Everett, based on your experience, which exams have you taken prior to these new ones? And then uh, which of the exams did you take 5.2, 9.0?
Prior to these, I went through the network virtualization track up to VCIX, so the VCF, NV, the VCAP deploy, and the VCAP design exams. And then for VCF, I've done VCF admin for 5.0, 5.2, and VCF admin and architect for 9.0. And I set for VCF troubleshooting in 9.0 and got a nice little reality check there. Uh, and broke my streak of winging exams and passing them.
Hey, I did the same thing when I sat for the 5.2 architect at the VMUG Connect in St. Louis last year and totally YOLO'd it and came close, but did not pass, which then broke my streak of passing every test as well. So
All
it's
right.
okay
So,
not to
so,
pass. I mean, it's okay.
so I mean, I think that's fantastic advice. There's nothing better than a bad experience to lead you forward. Not
Yeah.
necessarily failing a test is a bad experience, but what was it about the failure, whether it be that troubleshooting test or whether that architect test? What is it that you think you were missing? Do you think like were the questions fair? Was it just you didn't have the knowledge? The
I didn't have the knowledge. I wasn't ready, but since they had given us free sits for the certifications at the events, I figured, what the heck, I'll take it and see what I know and what I don't know.
but to be clear,
So
that's free sits for Advantage members.
yes, sorry, free
Okay.
sit for Advantage, VMUG Advantage member. So um, yeah, it was a good reality check, like Everett said. I mean, I went in not having any idea what's going to be on the architect test and just kind of sat there and went through and got pretty close, but it also helped because you get the printout of what you've missed. So I was able to more tailor my studying to know what I don't know, to better know than what I didn't know.
I think that's actually a really good point. When you do fail the exam, they give you a printout and it ties directly back to the blueprint. So that gives you an opportunity to see, where you need to focus in order to get those questions correct in the future. So ever your fail experience, what do you attest that to?
100% experience and preparation. I also I set the exam at Explore on Tour in London last year. Again, also because well, it was free. I had some spare time, so I figured I might as well take it. And in my experience, at least, the troubleshooting exam goes really in depth on specifics and well, actually troubleshooting. I felt the exam itself was pretty fair.
Okay.
I just felt that it's that particular exam was one that was, I think it's hard to prepare for ahead of time. It really felt like one of those, yeah, you just have to have hands-on experience with this, and it helps if you've just ran into a bunch of issues in production and had to fix them then and there.
Yeah, I do. I think we don't talk about this enough, that this is not a vSphere exam. This is VMware Cloud Foundation exam that covers the full breadth of their product set. And there's a big difference between just deploying a vCenter and, installing ESXi on some host versus what VCF is in its end state or its, running state. Again, I give credit to the guys who did the blog or the video series on YouTube with VMware Code. They did a fantastic job walking through all of those pieces. So I think that's a great starting point. There's things in there that you'll pick up as far as the terminology. Even in their bill of materials, it's great to understand what the products are, but to know that you have a management workload domain and you have or management domain, and then you have workload domains, right? Understanding what that relationship is. So I think our goal today is to we're going to take a look at that blueprint. We've highlighted some of the sections, subsections of that we kind of want to talk about at a different, maybe a little bit deeper of a level than just saying, oh, this is on the test. To maybe give you some keywords or some things to think about. Maybe if we say something, you want to go do a little bit more research to get some information on what might be on the test. So again, it's not going to be we're giving you the questions and answers. It's just key things that maybe we picked up when we took the test that we can kind of pass along to the folks that are listening. Um, if you guys have any questions, please put them in the chat, or I think there's also the Q&A. Do we have the
Q&A
Q&A
button
here?
I will say, so that video, the YouTube code series was done for 5.2, but it is pretty relevant to 9. So don't feel like we're pushing you to do something that's outdated. There's a lot of similar carryover concepts and things. Again, it comes to product name changes on a lot of that. So you just kind of got to be paying attention to what they're calling it in the old 5.2 versus the 9. So ARIA is dead. It's now VCF automation, VCF ops. So ARIA. Um, or if you've been using some of this stuff forever, like VCops, anybody else go back that far with Operations Manager?
Nope.
Am I just old? I think I'm
Yeah,
young.
I think, not to get into the licensing bit, but, prior to VCF, my organization didn't buy all the add-ons. So all of these products are brand new for our organization. So, Martin, that's not nice.
Harsh, but true, Martin. Harsh, but true.
Um, so if we can, I'd like to kind of dive into some of the networking. So Everett, you seem to have a good basis of knowledge on networking.
I hope
So
so.
I, we're going to throw you under the bus here and say, what are the different VCF networking components that someone's going to need to be aware of as they deploy, as you talk about being an administrator of VCF?
Mhm. I think specifically for 9, if you're coming from any prior knowledge with NSX, knowing that there are zeros and that there are ones, knowing the different deployment models for the edges and how the virtual routers interact with the edges, that's pretty important and fairly critical in understanding how the networking or the overlay networking works. More specifically for 9, just understanding the new concepts, because there was quite a few introduced in 9 with the VPCs and the transit gateways and the new types of subnets with the private subnets, the public subnets, and the weird in between one, which I can't quite come up with the name now because my 9 knowledge has already been evaporating. Thank you,
Transit
Martin.
Gateway. Thank
Thank
you,
you very
Mark.
much.
This is why we
Uh,
put him in the
yeah.
audience.
So yeah, just knowing what all the components are, what their individual function is very helpful. And specifically, if you've known NSX from before VCF, you've known most of what you need to know, and a lot of it is just figuring out where the new pieces sort of fit into this puzzle and how they all sort of interact together.
What about requirements, right? So in the videos, they kind of talk about the edge gateway. You have to have NSX managers. So when you look at a VCF deployment, we can talk basics, right? We're not talking design necessarily. What are some of those things that you're going to be looking to deploy for a VCF system?
Um, for networking specifically, well, you're obviously looking at some NSX managers. At least for your management domain, if you're running it collapsed, you'll have separate ones for your workload domains as well. Those are critical. If you want to lab it, you can make do with one. If you're doing production, you'll want 3, which has its impact on resources, of course. And other than that, it's mostly setting up edges and making sure all the necessary components are installed, although that's mostly handled by the VCF installer. So.
Yeah, I think that's all good information. I think another thing to mention from a test perspective is they kind of take the test from well, here's what I'll say. As you prepare to take the test, envision everything as a greenfield deployment. The
Yes.
majority of the questions,
Mhm.
if not all of the questions, will be related to a greenfield, not necessarily importing anything from like a 8 deployment into a VCF 9. uh, deployment. So focus solely on greenfield, and I think that'll be the best way you can kind of move forward. I do see a question in there, and I'd like to address it now, even though we're talking about networking. So Aries asked, from coming from the vSphere and vCenter, I'm gonna assume you mean ESX and vCenter 8, suggestions on how to prepare for the exam. Uh, my first question is, do you have any NSX experience? I assume because you didn't put it there, it's no. So uh, I recommend starting with actually the bill of materials and understanding what are the names of the products. I think once you understand the names of the products, you can go to the blueprint and start looking at which blueprint items reference those bill of materials items or names. And then if you're a current customer, there is training online that you can take advantage of. So it's specific to the exam. And then the second thing would be taking those bill of material items with the blueprint description, go to hands-on labs, search for a couple keywords, and just go through the hands-on lab. And that'll get you familiarity with the product, familiarity with deployments of different subcomponents of VCF, right? You're not going to do a full VCF component in hands-on labs. I think that'll be the best way to get hands-on, and it'll also build your knowledge and your vocabulary for all of the VCF components.
Yeah, I think the blueprint is kind of key since it basically lays out everything that could be on the test. So once you go through that blueprint, figure out what you're pretty confident on and what you're completely lost on, and focus on the stuff that you're lost on, but also take time to review what you think you already know too. I'll
Yeah.
say, like I said before, it's a lot wider of the product range of stuff you got to know, but it's not as deep as it used to be.
I think
Yeah.
that's an advantage if you're coming in mostly, if you already know vSphere very
Yeah.
well. I think you already know, I think I want to say roughly 40% of the content, more or less. You might get unlucky, of course, if there's a large pool of questions. And I've known someone that just like went in and said, like, well, half my questions happened to be, this was with 5.2, but half my questions were about ARIA.
Oh yeah.
And that was just very unfortunate in that instance. You might get unlucky. There's no guarantee that
Yeah.
what where the questions are. But I think it helps. You don't need to go super deep into many of the subjects. Having a working knowledge of what the product does and how to use it at a relatively basic level, I think will get you most of the way there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think a passing score is 300. I don't know exactly how they weight the questions to the score. I don't know if someone has that
I
information.
I think you can get partial credit for stuff, especially on some of the like the more open-ended, like pick the answers, but they're not going to tell you how many answers are actually for it on some of the questions. I feel like that was one change. You had some multiple choice where it was multiple and it would tell you like pick three, and but then I also had some multiple where it was here's six answers, pick the ones you think are right, but we're not going to tell you how many are the actual answers. So,
Yeah.
but really, if you haven't touched something, the hands-on labs is key. Like
Yeah, I would say because the test has less technical depth, right? And I mean like questions going down to the nitty-gritty and more topics. I
hmm.
would say don't worry about, if you know ESX and vCenter, don't even worry about studying it, right? You need to take a look at vSAN. You need to take a look at um,
And is that
the operations suite now. So I'm trying not to say ARIA, right?
I
It's
know
very difficult.
it's hard.
But I would say, when you look at that bill of materials, because it's much smaller than that blueprint, if you don't know what one of those things are, and as Everett said, you don't need to know the details of how many CPU it requires when you deploy the appliance. Like that's not what we're talking about, but have an understanding of what operations is compared to lifecycle manager, compared to cloud deployer, or is it cloud deployer now? They changed
Uh,
it from. I'm sorry,
SD.
VCF installer. It was cloud deployer at some point. Um, so I mean, there's 20 or 30 items on here, and one of the questions I remember from my test was, "What is Valero?" Like it was basically what that was, and I was like, "Man, that's a gas station down here in Texas. I don't know what this has to do with VCF, but so it does get into like some of the subcomponents. So uh, take a look at the bill of materials, go to the blueprint, find out what information is on the blueprint, and jump into hands-on labs. I think if you're not already a VCF customer, if you're a VCF customer, I would say maybe bite the bullet and take the on-demand training and maybe skip over the ESX and vCenter sections. Maybe you need to hit vSAN, um, but I think
Oh,
that's your best bet.
definitely know the difference between the two types of vSAN. I had several questions, I believe, that talked about that of ESA and OSA. And yeah, like the training Broadcom has that you get as a VCF customer, you get to see V Gandalf talking through a lot of that, which I thought those were really good because they have done some updates to some of that online stuff. Um, and honestly, I would just throw it on and kind of have it playing in the background while I was doing some other stuff for work during the day and got through maybe half of the training stuff just having it as background noise, which kind of popped up in my brain when I was taking the test. Like, oh, wait, I think I heard something, and then focus and
Yeah.
also mark your questions you're not sure about because there is a chance you can find the answer to your question in previous questions or future questions you're going to answer on the test.
Yeah. Martin mentioned
Yes.
it in the chat as well.
Yeah.
Something
Oh,
that a
yeah.
few of us found out last year. If you right click on an answer, it will strike through. So
Yes.
if you're sure it's not if you're sure that that is not the correct answer, you just strike it through and then come back to the question later.
Yeah.
That's actually,
Um,
I'm going to put that in my notes real quick. Hang on.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's one of those things that very few people seem to know,
Yeah. I figured
including
out last
myself.
when
Until
we were
well,
talking about it.
most of us, most of the people I know at least, didn't know about this either until I think Martin came across it himself.
Like, holy crap, this is like game changer. This makes multiple choice so much easier now of just limiting stuff that's wrong. Um,
Yeah, and again, you don't have to get every question right. So I wouldn't, as you go through the test, answer the questions that you know for sure. Mark the ones that you might have as incomplete. 60 questions in the time frame they give you is, I think, overkill. I think, I don't know that I've been there any more than 45 minutes when I sit for an exam, because I kind of go in and, either I know it or I don't. I don't dwell on it a
yeah,
whole lot.
I'll do the same thing. I'll kind of just start going and answering things. And if I spend more than a few, like, I don't know, 15 seconds on a question and still not sure what the answer is, I'll mark it and then just keep going through the test and try to get everything out that I know. And then I'll circle back and review stuff. And hopefully I figured out some of the stuff just from continuing through the test.
Yeah, same. I've had instances where I just had a particularly long question with fairly elaborate answers, where I just went like, "Not now, mark it for later. Just keep going while I have the momentum," and just
Yeah.
yeah, because I think was it 3 hours you have to sit the exam, if I'm not mistaken, um,
An hour, 2 hours,
or 2 hours.
120 or nine. Yeah, it's either an hour and a half or 2 hours, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a
100.
long time.
Yeah, it's definitely 135 minutes.
so yeah, roughly 2 minutes, including some before and after, and getting started per question is yeah
Yeah.
for every individual question is yeah you have plenty of time in my experience. I think they've done away with the extra time you got if you're not a native English speaker a while ago. Yeah.
Yeah. Download the docs.
All right,
For
let's see. So kind of going down, you feel wrong. Going down my next list, while we're still kind of hanging out in the network fundamentals, I feel like NSX is a big piece of this. Given a scenario, configuring some of the virtual network fabrics, you know, Everett, can you give an example or talk about overlay versus VLAN backed?
yeah, so knowing when to use overlay versus when to use VLAN backed, realizing VLAN backed is mostly useful either for legacy networks or for stuff that just goes outside of your virtual environments. Think physical hosts, Maybe something hosted on a different virtualization platform, God forbids. Um, those are around. This,
Erica, edit that out.
we've had stuff. No, we've also had stuff going, for example, to NASA's that were just appliances. I think well, service insertion isn't really relevant anymore in 9. Um, but yeah, I think that's important. Just knowing the distinction between those network types and knowing that one will force you to use NSX networking end to end, whereas well, overlay so at least, whereas VLANs will allow you to basically just use NSX well for your backbone essentially, and just keeping all your layer 3 outside of it if you want to.
Great, thanks. So I just want to talk about, so we're pulling items from Objective 2 or Section 2, Objective 2.4. So just kind of lightly covering some of the VMware network fundamentals, which I think is odd. I feel like, if we jump to Section 4, which is deploying and configuring. So we're going to jump now to Section 4 and talk about identifying the components of a VCF deployment. So we've kind of talked about this, but I'm going to let Dave take this one. How would what are some of those components for a base, VCF deployment? What are the things that are a requirement?
I will say I really like the new wizard for deploying the whole thing. It does really simplify the process. And also there is still the big ass Excel spreadsheet that you can fill out ahead of time to get a bunch of your IP ranges and things just kind of pre-configured. So as you're going to run the installer, I still recommend going through that giant Excel sheet with the different tabs for different parts of it. It is helpful. Uh, but stepping through it, some basic questions of, are you doing greenfield? Are you going to import different appliances into here that you have out there? Like you've got the option to import a vCenter or operations manager. So you kind of answer that while you're walking through the wizard. If you're not importing stuff, then you have to enter more information about IP addresses and things like that, so it can auto deploy all the appliances for you. You also have the option of skipping some of that stuff and making it more of a day 2 activity. Just walk through the wizard for fun. Like my company, we haven't moved to VCF yet. We're doing an engagement with a partner to do that. But I think now I've walked through the installer probably 8 different times, just going with different ways of setting things up. And I've got my JSON files all sitting off to the side now for when we actually get to the point where I can click the deploy now button once we have them on site doing it. But just walking through that and then also going through the spreadsheet, I've also changed my thoughts on how we are deploying things. So that's helpful. But as far as the actual pieces, yeah, it's decisions on operations, network, or operations for network, logs. VCF logs replaces ARIA logs. That one I know you can't import from your old one to your new one, so you're doing a fresh deploy of that, but you could export the logs from the old one to the new one if you want them in the new one. My operations has been around so long and is full of so much garbage at this point that we're just going to deploy a brand new one, and then I'll export the dashboards that I've created and I want from the old to the new. So really, it's the installer walks you through the whole process, which is just lovely at this point. It makes it so much easier. I mean, if anybody's ever tried to deploy this back in the 4.x days for fun, and remember how you have to go through like 87 different things you're deploying on Windows boxes, on Linux boxes, and it was just a nightmare. This is so much simpler and just nice now.
Even in 5.2, it
Yeah.
was much less streamlined than it is now.
Yeah, they've done a good job of just making the actual install a lot easier. Whether or not it works without a hitch, that's the trick.
We're going to find out real soon.
Exactly.
Yeah, it always works fine in a lab.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lots of snapshots and rolling back when it doesn't work, right?
Yeah. Yeah. All right. We've had Martin join us. I appreciate he was kind of trolling Dave a little bit in the chat, but we're going to kind of put him on the spot. He happens to have some vSAN experience, so I kind of wanted to jump back to Section 2 and cover a couple little topics there. So I think the very first question I have is what's going to be the difference between OSA and ESA as it relates to vSAN?
Well, the primary thing is the types of disks you can use. So with OSA, the original storage architecture, you could deploy hybrid with spinning disks and a cache tier, which was either just regular flash SATA SSDs or SAS SSDs or whatever, even Optane if you had the budget back then. Or you could go all flash and have the fancy dedupe and compression and all that stuff. And then with ESA or the storage architecture, it's all NVMe backed. So that is one of the key things to keep in mind. Also, keep in mind that disk groups are no longer a thing in ESA, which is a welcome change. But those are, yeah, pretty much the main differences you need to keep in mind.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think when I first started hearing OSA and ESA, I was really worried that I was like missing something, but it's legitimately old storage architecture. It's just an acronym. It's not anything fancy. So just think old and think about new or the E of NVMe, right? For the ESA, and you've got it. So um, related to the exam, thoughts on storage policies that you might need to be aware of or concepts.
It's important to keep in mind that they've introduced the concept of principal storage and supplemental storage. Understanding which types can be used when and where is pretty important. So for the management domain, for example, you can only deploy it on Fiber Channel, vSAN, or NFS. Keep that in mind. If you want to use Fiber Channel over Ethernet or NVMe over TCP or all those kind of niche product protocols, I'm gonna get sued for this, but those can only be used for supplemental storage. Same with iSCSI, which is, I think, going the way of the dinosaur eventually, but can only be used for supplemental storage, which has been pretty shocking in a few customer engagements that I've done over the past few months now. People were very surprised that that was no longer a principal storage thing.
Yeah, actually, that impacts me. We're iSCSI backed, so we're trying to figure out what our solution is going to be when we go for our first greenfield deployment. I don't know that we've necessarily figured that out, but we'll.
You can just deploy it in 8 and then just brownfield import, and then you can fully support it then, but I didn't tell you this.
All right. Let's see. I'm going to read this question real quick before I hop on the next one.
Yeah, that's the exam. You've done the exam if we're all talking about the question that came in from Carlos.
Yeah.
That's the support exam, right?
Yeah, I want to say that's about like 70-80%, especially if it's on VCF 9.
Yeah.
If most of your experience is on 5.2, there's some new things to pick up on. Some of the differences that you might not. Oh yeah, then on 9 you're fine.
Yeah.
Assuming
If
you
you
know what you're doing and weren't blindly
guys,
clicking. That's always there's always that caveat, of course. I have much experience with Windows Server by going next, 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 finish. No, if you've done several deployments and you know what you're doing, then you should be absolutely fine.
yeah.
Again, not knowing exactly what products you were deploying, I would still say take a look at the bill of materials. If you've never worked with, maybe you haven't worked with, well, it's not Tanzu anymore, sir. It is now
It's
the
VKS.
vSphere supervisor.
Yeah.
So
Know that
Tanzu will
term.
not be on the test.
There's one of your
vSphere
terms right there.
Kubernetes service,
Supervisor.
actually.
Yeah.
What, say that again, Martin?
VMware Kubernetes service, actually, VKS.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh,
All right. So good information. So I agree. I think you have a great base for the exam, right? Um, so I would say, brush up on a couple of the products maybe you haven't deployed. And it's not just about deployment, it's going to be about administration too. So diving into the details a little bit of what these products do and maybe how to troubleshoot them specifically. And we talked about NSX earlier. There's tools inside of NSX that you can, I think it's TraceFlow. What's the other one off the top of my head?
The one that
Traffic
does port
capture.
mirroring, traffic
Yeah,
capture.
I
Yeah.
think they call it
It,
traffic capture, but
Yeah, so just be aware that those tools exist. You might see them on a question as to, what are the tools that are available for troubleshooting, traffic from point A to point B inside of VCF. So it's not just can you deploy it, it's also can you administer it. So actually it would be
yeah.
really cool if they did a deployment exam, an administration exam, or a day two exam.
I think that's what the support is mostly for. Um, and same thing for, I think deploy will likely be more prevalent in the VCAP exams, although I haven't sat
Yeah.
for those new ones.
All right, so
Martin,
Martin, putting
you
you
said
back.
everything. So just tell us about all the tests since you've taken all of them.
Multiple times.
I did a
Oh,
VCAP
that is something I want to
last
go
week as
back to.
well.
Don't feel bad if you don't pass the test in the first time. Yeah, it sucks, but I think at that St. Louis Connect event, almost every VMUG leader who was there went and took the test, and a lot of them we kind of bullied into taking the tests. I think there's about a 50-60% pass rate. So, I
I
mean,
felt it was 60-65-ish, but yeah.
a lot of us passed, some of us didn't, but you know what? Don't worry. Like, study up again and go take it again. And the best part, if you've got your VMUG Advantage membership, you also get a 50% off on one test. So
Yeah.
it's worth the
Yeah, or
membership there.
just
If you work for a partner, you can just request free vouchers as well, which is
Oh,
also nice.
that is very nice.
if you're at the events, and indeed, and you have advantage, just go there and take it, right? If you're at the event, you might as well just take the hour or so that it costs you, even if it's just to do sort of a heat check and see, okay, what do I know? What do I not? What do I not know? You might wing it. Again, like you said, I wasn't there at St. Louis, but at Explore, there were several people just going in saying, well, at Explore you always get the free test if I'm not mistaken. You might as well,
Yeah.
or
You
last year
get
at
one, yeah.
least.
Last year, yeah, I think they
Yeah,
started it last year, but it seemed like every tier of registration you got a sit for an exam. So I was
yeah.
I
definitely one of
think
those people
so.
who was like, yeah, screw it, I'll just sign up and go take the
No,
part.
exactly. I mean, if
Yep.
if you get offered a free test, why not take it, right?
Yeah.
You might wing it. Plenty of people wing it and just go in without expectations, and yeah.
Yeah, I think, if you're listening to us, you're in the right place, right? You're getting some base of information, right? You want to take the exam. You're just looking for how to get over that hump of feeling confident to go in there. So our goal is to give you that confidence or give you those tips or tricks, those, where to go get the information. I think, before I sat for my first exam, yes, I was kind of doing it on a whim. But I also knew like 2 weeks ahead of time I was going to do it. And I was like, all right, I don't even know where to begin to look for some of these things. So we want to make sure we're sharing the information with you that can help you get there and make sure you're successful, right? We can't be there with you while you take the exam, but hopefully the things that we're talking about and touching on some of the technology, hitting those keywords, those buzzwords are going to stick in your mind and help you pass the test. So I'd like to jump back into a couple of more of these vSAN questions because Martin looks really excited to answer these.
So giddy.
Let's talk about options for resilience and data availability. What are some kind of keywords, things to think about as a test taker would want to sit and know?
Understand how the vSAN storage policies work. Understand what erasure coding does and what the different site stretching possibilities are and topologies that are supported either in a management domain and in a workload domain, what prerequisites there are, a number of nodes you need to take into account when building out something like that. Those are all typical test questions. I'm not saying that they are on the test, but I have gotten them in the 5.2 and earlier days, questions like that. So yeah,
All right,
it
so
is.
pop quiz, the minimum number of ESXi nodes you need to deploy a management cluster.
Well, a management cluster is minimum of 4. You
Okay, and
could
why
put
is
in,
that? Why
well,
is that?
because ESA is a minimum of 4 nodes.
Yes, exactly. This is good
Yay.
information. You did great.
Seems like I'm
All
ready
right.
for my VCAP storage then.
If you want to lab this, you can do it on one.
You
Eh?
can.
Yes, yeah. Well, we're talking about passing the test. We're not talking
But
about maybe a
the
real. We are talking about a
that's true.
greenfield
Yeah.
supported deployment. That's what we want to focus on to pass this test. So yeah, four minimum of four nodes, and that's really based on, I'll say, the historical requirement for vSAN minimum requirements for nodes, right? You want to be able to put one of those in maintenance potentially, and you need the resiliency and the availability of the storage from the other nodes to be available. So,
Exactly.
anything else you want to maybe dive into on resiliency or data availability kind of topics?
Be aware of the host rebuild reserve and operational reserve options that exist, because those might also be on there. How that impacts the available storage or amount of nodes you can put into maintenance, all that stuff. Basically, anything that isn't a toggle on service in vSAN, so to speak, um, might just be a question on there.
Okay, and when you go to put a host in maintenance mode, uh, there's multiple options as far as VCN goes. What are those options?
So you can go with ensure accessibility, and then vSAN does a check on do I have the enough copies to present all the virtual objects that I have, if they are requested. You can also do full data migration if you're going to take a host down for longer than just a reboot. That might be a better option. Can be pretty bandwidth intensive and might cause a lot of latency. That is not a test question per se, but something to keep in mind. Or you could just wing it and say, like, screw it, I'm gonna yank this cable out, bring it right back in 2 seconds. Nothing's gonna go wrong. I'll just ignore Mr. Murphy in the corner over there. And then you take that risk. But if you have enough availability, that might be an option for you. Yeah.
So bandwidth is an interesting question. It's one thing we didn't really talk about when we touched on NSX, because I would say it's not really NSX, but the number of VLANs required for a greenfield VCF deployment, right? So you mentioned bandwidth, right? Obviously, we need a VLAN for vSAN. What are the other VLANs that we need a little bit, or
You
that we need
need
as a requirement?
you
Just
need
do
a
it on one,
man.
right?
Yeah, yeah,
No,
just
but
one.
the VCF installer is very opinionated. It wants you to have a
That's a good way to
vMotion
put it.
VLAN. It has it. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, it wants you to have a TEP VLAN. It wants you to have a vSAN VLAN if you have that, and a management vSAN. I think that's the bare minimum.
Do you
If I'm
need a
not
vMotion
mistaken.
VLAN too?
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's quite a
Um,
few. So it's from my brief memory, it's going to be management, vMotion, vSAN, TEP.
Yeah,
So it should be a
you
minimum of
you'll
four.
probably
There
want to.
are, as you're going through that installer, you're going through the spreadsheet, there is an opportunity to reuse these base four for other things down the road, but it's a minimum of four, I believe.
Yeah,
So four
and
hosts,
coming back
four
to
VLANs.
vSAN, you might want to do traffic separation there, which is also an option now. Or if you're being fancy and deploying vSAN storage clusters, then you can also do front end and back end separation, which are also all valid test questions. So important to keep in mind all those different types of networks. Provisioning, something most people forget or don't really use. Provisioning can also be a requirement down the line. It's not in the installer per se, but it's still an option.
Yeah. I'm going to say this is my last question for you, but don't hold me to it because I think of random things all the time. What would you describe as vCAN space efficiency?
That's the dedupe and compression. And with 9, if you get qualified, you can also do global dedupe in specific cases, which I hope will be expanded soon because I've got a lot of customers wanting to do a lot more with the limited hardware they can get their hands on. But space efficiency with ESA, it's just compression right now. Um, as I said, you can get qualified for global dedupe if you request that feature, which can then dedupe all your data across the entire vSAN cluster. And I think even multiple clusters, but might be wrong there. Um, I didn't get any global dedupe questions since it was still preview. I think they're shying away from that. But just keep in mind that ESA for now is just compression. If you go OSA, you can do compression and dedupe, but then you would need all flash.
Okay. Martin, I didn't do an introduction for you. So now that we're at the tail end, would you introduce yourself to those that are listening or watching?
Sure. Maarten van der Riese, based out of Belgium, like Evert. One of the VMUG leaders here. Broadcom Night vExpert since 9 years, I think now. And just general nerd.
Smart guy.
All
Smart guy.
right, and
Local legends.
you will be at VMUG Connect in Amsterdam.
Yeah. And
Excellent.
in Minneapolis as well.
Okay. Do you have any presentations?
I have one that I will commit to, and the second one that I'm frantically stressing about, and we'll have a call with Evert after this call. We're gonna do a talk about how we can use Terraform with VCF automation, but VCF automation is being very
Itself.
opinionated. Let's keep it at that.
Okay. And do you have any other tips for the crowd specific to the administrator exam? Anything else that we may have missed? Opinions on the test, the fairness of the questions, things of that
I
nature.
I like the admin exam a lot. I felt it was the hardest of the three that I did when I last did this talk. I did architect and support as well, and then just did the VCAP networking a few weeks ago. I felt admin was the hardest because it was very broad. As was stated before, it was VCF automation, VCF ops, lifecycle manager in SDDC manager, all those kinds of things. And if you've been to enough events that you've sort of understood what automation is and does and what operations is and does, then you can kind of wing it, which is pretty much what I did. I felt that if you don't really understand what automation all apps is or VM apps is, there was a fair amount of questions on my exam, but then others didn't get a lot of questions on theirs. So kind of depends on the luck of the draw there, I think. But anything that is on the blueprint is fair game.
Yeah, I'll say that I feel like when I sat for the exam, I had a lot of life cycle questions, and that's not something that I really used in the past. So, um, you
I'd say
know,
something else. I threw the link to the actual like Excel workbook there for the VCF deployment planning ahead of time. See how much of that you can just fill out the first time you look at it, and that'll also kind of tell you what you know and what you don't know about VCF from a deployment perspective, which can be very helpful for the test. You go to fill out some boxes on there, and you're like, I have no idea what this is. They do have an example of what you should be putting in there, and then you can do some Googling on what that is to get a better understanding of it. So I feel like that's surprisingly helpful at
yeah,
times.
that's actually a great idea.
Maybe one other thing I just thought of as well. If you do have quite a bit of experience with 5.2, it probably is a good idea to spend most of your time on on learning the differences between 5.2 and 9. There's quite a few things that are similar enough where it will trip you up on an exam, but they have changed, especially with things moving into operations, for example, with the role of the SDDC manager. It's worth it to just look into what is new and also just what has changed to make sure you don't just try to answer based on knowledge that's no longer relevant.
All right, we got a question from, I'm assuming I don't know whether they do first name, or last name, first name. Anyway, they're a middleware DevOps background, built a home lab last year. What technologies should you master before pursuing a VCF certification? And then which VCF certification should you try? So, my opinion is I think the admin's the way to go. I think that's honestly the launching point for anyone. I wouldn't do anything below that. And unless you were an actual architect or someone designing infrastructure systems, I don't know that architect is the right launch point. So I would say VCP admin, which is kind of the test that we've been talking about today. Um, and I would say my advice today, I don't know why today, but is take a look at the bill of materials, get familiar with the terminology, the vocabulary, take a look at the blueprint, And then if you want to kick the tires, jump over to Hands-On Labs, which is you get to sign up for a free account and take those keywords, plug them into the search in the Hands-On Labs, and start taking those Hands-On Labs to get familiar with the infrastructure, more familiar with the vocabulary. All of the Hands-On Labs have been upgraded to 9. Uh, so it's not back when they first kicked these tests off that things were still kind of in transit between 8 and 9. So you were fully ready to go at 9.0 to get the information that you need.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, hands-on labs are key right now. And if you do have VMUG Advantage, and once you pass the test, you'll get your license keys for VCF, which is a nice bonus. So you get a 128 core license to build out your own home lab if you'd like to do that, but you have to pass the test first. So since you don't have keys to build a home lab, you can try and run it within the, like, what is it, 90-day time frame of trial before things expire is an option, or play around with the hands-on labs. Um, I kind of vote towards hands-on labs because break it and just turn the lab down and you're good. You don't have to worry about undoing whatever you've done previously. And although it could also be helpful if you break it and spend hours trying to figure it out, but you are limited on time with the hands-on labs, so you got to keep that in mind.
Yeah, I think the other thing is, now that the platform is maturing, that there's a cost associated with home labs. So I'm not necessarily going to argue against a home lab. I'm just going to say, when I have a couple Nooks here that are running some older version stuff, but the entry for that was probably about $500 to $700. I don't know that you're getting a reasonable home lab for VCF 9 for I, I'm going to say 2 grand. And maybe
Mhm.
it's somewhere between 1,200 to 15 to that
Closer
$2,000.
to,
But
Not
realistically,
with
with the
these
cost of
RAM
memory,
prices.
I think you're at $2,000 before you have that home lab. So we did have a question in there about can we have a session on home labs? I will defer to Erica, who's a VMUG employee, and she can kind of jump in and talk. Maybe that's a great idea for the future. I'll say in the meantime, while that kind of maybe gets sorted out before I volunteer anybody for anything, take a look at VMware Code, YouTube. If you can look at videos from William Lamb, there's a lot of content out there that can probably get you started. Um, but if you're
Daniel
looking for more of a
Krieger's been
Q&A, I think
doing.
that's something that um, we can probably look at hosting from a VMUG community perspective. And then also if you can hop on or register for a Connect, at almost every Connect, there is going to be, I'll call a home lab warrior at one of the Connects that you can talk to and get information from. So just a couple ideas of
yeah.
where to where
And
to go
I,
for that
and
information.
just to throw out there, like I started building a new home lab last year with some of the minis forums A2 PCs. I got 2 built out before all the RAM prices shot up, and I spent about 2,300 bucks on the 2 PCs right now. And I literally just priced out to build an identical version. And right now, one of the same exact node that I built is $1,900 because of RAM. RAM
Yeah,
is the most expensive, and that's only 96 gigs of RAM, SODIMMs, so it's expensive. I think that's like $800 now. And the first time I
storage as
bought it
well.
was 270. I think the PC is almost the cheapest part now. The hard drives and RAM are just so expensive.
Yeah, and we don't even want to talk about putting a GPU in it, right?
No.
I
No.
mean, if you're wealthy, go for it.
Yeah. I did see someone mention holodeck. If you do have the hardware available already, in your home lab, holodeck is a great way to quickly just spin up a nested instance of VCF to play around with. That is easy to fix and easy to break. Well, easy to break, easy to fix is entirely up to you and the way you break it. So if you do have the hardware available, I think holodeck is a great way to already start playing around as well.
Yeah. And even if you've got some extra hardware at your company and you've got a well enough boss who's going to let you kind of play around with that stuff. I know we keep talking, we've got a whole full infrastructure of old stuff literally waiting for us to build out a lab when we have free time at work, which we're going on 6 months trying to build that out still and
What
have
is
got
this thing you
exactly.
call free time?
I don't know. I've heard about it. It sounds interesting. I'd really like to experience it someday,
Huh.
but
Well, speaking of free time, we are just about at that hour mark. I know Erica was just about to jump in, but I want to thank Martin as our special guest for jumping in. I appreciate you answering some questions, and I'll see you next week in Amsterdam. Same with you, Everett. Dave, thank you as always for participating. Erica, this is all yours.
No, I love it. I appreciate the segue. I was going to steal it myself. I just have one little, if I can find my button again, I just have one screen to share as more of a housekeeping thing, and then we can all keep chatting. Um, but I do want to be conscious of time. So again, this is my plug for Connect. Again, every single person we've had on this panel will be speaking at least one, maybe a couple. So we'll make sure to look at that, and we hope you join us there. This session was being recorded, so we will distribute that recording in the wrap up. It will also deploy a survey when it closes out. So if you can answer those survey questions for us, that helps us to be able to continue to bring fresh, relevant content. I saw a great suggestion in the chat, as Justin mentioned. So if you ever have suggestions that you want for us to continue bringing content, you can email content@vmug.com. I'm one of the folks in that inbox, and that's how this session came about. People wanted more certification help, and we assembled Justin and then a panel, and here we are. And then please use the code community for 10% off a 1-year Advantage membership. We did lots of Advantage plugs today, so want to make sure everyone knows about that. You also get vDefend firewall and Avi load balancer included if you're an Advantage member, and personal use licenses to set up a home lab if you pass that certification. And then a ton of discounts on courses, great experiences at Connect, at Explore. I really can't say more about it. So there's that QR code if you'd like to join Advantage and support VMUG. And that's all I've got. I really appreciate you all being here. Thank you, Justin, for moderating and getting it together. We'll have dates for the next one soon. And if you are traveling to Amsterdam, have fun, be safe, and we're excited to see you there. And I will see some folks in Minneapolis. So bye, everyone.
Bye.
But